Hi, I'm JC Vaughn from the Overstreet Comic Book Press Guide. Sometimes editor, sometimes co-writer, sometimes writer of She. But you're not here to see me. You're here to see the main man, Billy Tucci. So let's bring him on.
Hello, Jeffrey. How are you?
Hello, Billy, and welcome to She, the Warrior Returns.
Yes, our San Diego Comic-Con at Home 2021 panel. And we've got a great panel today. A great panel.
We do indeed.
Yes.
And I think that well, as much as we want to dive into the story sort of immediately, let's bring on our other panelists one by one and introduce them, starting with your lovely wife, Deborah.
Oh, of course. So here is my partner in crime, the executive director of Crusade Comics, Crusade Fine Arts, actually, Miss Deborah Tucci. Hello, honey.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Deborah.
How are you?
And welcome to the virtual San Diego Con.
Woohoo!
Comic-Con at Home. That's what it's called.
Comic-Con at Home, indeed.
Comic-Con at Home.
Next up is the one and only Stephen Peros, your co-writer and now writer of this amazing new She trilogy.
There we go. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, everybody. Great to see you all. Great to be here in San Diego. Got my swimming trunks on, ready to go. Wait a minute, am I? I'm not sure.
Very, very nice, Stephen. And finally, last but certainly not least, a huge component of the artistic team, Mr. Brian Miller of Hi-Fi Colors.
There he is. Hello, Brian.
Hey, good to see everybody. I see we've got a full panel room here at San Diego Comic-Con. We can't wait to talk about She.
Yeah, let's do some She talking.
Indeed. So, Billy, let's dive right in, man. We'd expect that most of the people tuning into this panel already know who She is, but you've taken a lot of steps, made a lot of efforts to make sure that your current stories in particular are very accessible to new readers. So why don't you tell people who She is and what is her backstory?
Sure. Well, first thing I'd like to introduce, if I can introduce myself to those who may not know who I am, and also our creative team can introduce themselves as well, tell a little bit about themselves. But my name is Billy Tucci. I am the publisher of Crusade Fine Arts, aka Crusade Comics. I am the creator of She. I created it back in 1990. I created her, and it's basically a modern day samurai story. We published She for over 10 years, probably over 100 issues of She. I think we've sold over 3 million comics. And then I took a little break. You get a little burnt out as you do, self-publishing. And I was able to, I was fortunate enough to do a lot of work for Marvel and then most of it for DC for the past 15 years. And starting with work on Marvel's Heroes for Hire, doing a lot of covers for them. I then went to DC where I worked on Jonah Hex. With Brian Miller did that fantastic cover to the Jonah Hex number 53, written by Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray. Then I did Sergeant Rock the Lost Battalion that Brian did the colors on. Brian basically has done all my coloring work on all of our DC Comics coloring work. But that wasn't the first work. We started with She Akai back in 2005, I believe. And I think, Jeff, that might have been your first.
Not only was that my first issue of She, that was my first big comic period that I wrote.
And Brian colored that, and that was a fun issue where we brought Anna back in time to fight during World War II. But so then, of course, again, our Sergeant Rock, we did a bunch of other stuff. Then we did some great the Flash versus Superman story, which I think was the definitive Flash versus Superman story, at least at my point. And then, right, Brian, and then the sequel to that, which was Batman Trick for the Scarecrow, which Brian and I were nominated for an Eisner for, and but we lost. But I guess it's really being nominated, right? That's what it's all about. And so that's my little story.
All right. So we're going around here. Deborah, how did you get involved in all of this?
Kicking and screaming.
Hi. I married him. That's how.
No, but you posed even before that.
So yes. Well, when Billy decided he wanted to, after trying to break into comics, to no avail, and decided he was going to do his own thing, we kind of, for a while anyway, for a few years, we were partnered up, and I did pose for a lot of the reference photos for issue #1, Way of the Warrior. But I was always the business brain. And then we parted for a few years, and once we got back together, I kind of tiptoed my way back in. And now it's 90% of what I do all day.
And we'll get into some of the minutia of that later on, but I know that it is a big full-time occupation for you. Mr. Peros, you have known Billy longer than all of the rest of us. How is it that, or maybe I'm presuming something, did you guys ever collaborate before this current work, other than him providing a cover for your brilliant graphic novel Stoker and Wells?
No, and I think no, well, we did. I'm sorry, we did on film projects. Billy and I have pitched TV shows, movies. He's been out here. We've sat side by side in offices and studio lots all over Los Angeles. While people say, "Do you mind if I eat while you pitch?" But meanwhile, they don't actually mean it because they're slobbering down on a hoagie while you're sitting there trying to pitch. So yes, so we have made wonderful attempts on wonderful projects that still may see the light of day. And I think
we even wrote the screenplay for Illy Samaha for She.
That's true. That's true. Billy got that wonderful deal with early in the life of She, and asked me would I lend an assist on that, and that's a movie that needs to be made someday for sure. But yes, no, Billy and I we collaborated on dreams in the lunchroom in junior high school, and now here we sit at Virtual Comic-Con with a whole. We each have our respective lengthy resumes behind us. Billy in the world everybody knows, I've worked primarily in film and TV. I also have a published playwright as well. This film behind me with Kirsten Dunst, The Cat's Meow, is a film I'm most known for, a Lionsgate film. But I've also sold pilots to MTV, NBC. I've worked on movies, movies with Jackie Chan, Dolly Parton. So I've had quite a bit of experience and luck. And then graphic novels since 2017, when I launched my own book. The mock-up is on the wall behind me, Stoker and Wells, which Billy was instrumental in helping to mentor and guide, and also create a wonderful exclusive variant cover. And introduced me to the great J.C. Vaughn, who I don't mind calling him great to his face, who was a wonderful editor on the book. And largely because he's such a good writer, he was quite a good editor and a mentor to me to learn the craft of graphic novel writing, which I get to segue to bring to Billy Tucci and She, when he was pitching me this revitalization of She with Return of the Warrior. He had done notes for a treatment for the first book. We chatted, we talked. I gave him. I kept asking him more and more questions from my discipline of 3-act structure and story and everything coming from character, and we had a really great long conversation, and gave him just feedback, and then I don't know, half hour later the phone rings again. He's like, "Do you want to write this with me?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to write this with you." So
Classic Billy.
All right, I want to segue for just a second backwards. Stoker and Wells. One of the things about it that I always thought was great was that your artist on that book, Barry Orkin, has a long history with She, including doing all of the logos, as well as working with Billy. And he's another classmate of you guys from junior high. Is that right?
7th grade. Billy, Barry, and I know each other from 7th grade, the now no longer in existence Peter J. Brennan Junior High School in North Babylon, New York. Shout out to North Babylon.
To the Bulldogs.
To the Bulldogs, as it were.
Barry also colored the first 2 issues of She,
Mm-hmm.
and did a lot of our design work. And his artwork graced the back cover of She, Way of the Warrior #1. And now look, we come full circle, and
he's not on this panel, but he's one. I just wanted to just give him a shout out. He's wonderful in all 3 disciplines. He was my inker, pencils and ink on my book, but the cover the cover he did all. You know, he penciled, he inked, and he colored it. He's quite the craftsman in all arenas.
And I will say, somebody who's really dedicated to getting it right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's something I learned during that process. That I was a fan of his work before that, but seeing it up close professionally was a real blast. How did your background, if at all, prepare you for co-writing with Billy on the first one, Return of the Warrior?
I tend to write alone, but I have co-written, and I also have I got into the business through internships where I was working on the producer side of things. So I've always realized the end game is not misery. The end game is peace and harmony, and enjoy it. Billy and I had never. We pitched and we worked to pitch out together, but I never actually worked for him in this world of his creation. That's a machine that he has started. So I was like, okay, I hope this works out, and will I have to be making an effort to make it enjoyable, or will it be easily enjoyable? And I wound up being easily enjoyable for all of Billy's. For those of you who know him, who are watching, who've watched him at other panels, who've seen him at Comic-Con, and Debbie, of course, knows this as well. Billy's got an energy that could be misinterpreted as someone who's, not organized, doesn't know which way is up. And the fact of the matter is, he was thoroughly organized through book 1, through book 2, and now book 3. He's on top of everything. He's a great collaborator. He's also a great boss, and he's the best kind of secure creator, which is he knows what she's supposed to be, so he doesn't micromanage. It's sort of like those great movie directors who you hear like Woody Allen. They only speak up if you're doing it wrong. Everybody says, "Wow, he just kind of really didn't." So Billy is really good with, and he has called me out when, that's just not going to work. But he's really open, and I'm sure it's not just me. I'm sure it's been through this whole process with all the many co-creators he's worked with, other writers, other artists. He gives you the room to do your best work. He says, I brought you on for a reason. You're a writer who I like. What am I going to not let you do your best? You're an artist who I like. You're a penciler who I like. You're an inker who I like. I'm going to let you colorist who I like. I'm going to let you do your best work. And he does. And it was very, very liberating to work with him on this process. So I didn't have to do any preparation except having worked with people before and develop my own sense of professionalism. So now I just joined it over to Billy, and it just has been a pleasure doing 2 books, and now we're on the 3rd.
Yeah. Phenomenal. I'll come back and ask you a few detailed things about that, because I think the fans who haven't seen this stuff yet are going to love it. I've been pretty loud about how big a fanboy I am of this stuff, even though I'm working on it with you guys. But let's talk to Brian. Brian, you've got a pretty incredible artistic background. You want to tell people about it a little bit? Just give them an introduction to you.
Sure. Well, I'm the co-founder of Hi-Fi Color Design, and I've colored comics for Marvel, DC, Disney, Image. I think when I figured it out, it was pretty much everybody in the industry except for Todd McFarlane. So if he's watching this, give me a call, Todd. I need to complete the loop.
Wow, you never did any Spawn stuff, huh?
Wow. No, none of that. But I did think of something, Billy, which is that you probably don't remember this, but I got to color the She Wolverine covers for Tower Records. Oh. And so that may have predated the
Ishikawa.
Yeah. And so that was really early in my pro career, and it was so much fun to do. And I've even had fans recently who've tracked those down online, and they're like, I found the Tower Records She Wolverine stuff. If I send it to you, will you autograph it and everything? And I'm like, how'd you even find that?
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, because
that's been a long time for sure.
Tower Records approached us. I think it's San Diego or something, and we were talking up the book, and and they said, "Can we do a exclusive edition?" And we're like, "Absolutely!" That was a fun cover.
Yes.
That's a far superior cover to the main one, and it's all Mike because of the way I drew it. The other one was a wraparound, but I think the Tower Records one is that was great. That was a fun one.
Brian, you're pretty well known in Star Wars circles too, as well as general comics.
Yeah, I do a lot of illustrations for what they call sort of like the fine art section of like Lucasfilm, and so a lot of collectible artwork. The way I like to think of it is imagining the scenes that happen off screen. So a good example would be like, we know that Boba Fett, captured Han Solo and Carbonite, and at some point we see Boba Fett and Han Solo at Jabba's palace, and so I might illustrate something that happened between those areas for the fans to collect. And so I do a lot of the collectible artwork like that, limited edition, silk screens and fine art prints for things like Star Wars, and also weird cartoons like Rick and Morty and Archer and things like that. So I just have a lot of fun kind of exploring my like creativity that way.
Do you find there's an overlap between the comics and Star Wars audience, or is it pretty separate?
There's a little bit of overlap, but not a lot. I would say it's shocking. Like some of my illustration fans have no ideas that I work on comics and vice versa. And then there'll be that one person who's like, I've collected your art for 5 years, and now I just discovered that you're also, the founder of Hi-Fi, and I had no idea. I've got all these comics you worked on. So it is kind of strange how there's not always that overlap you might think there is. And
I also want to point out that you and your wife did a phenomenal book about the coloring process.
Oh, thank you.
That I made the mistake of loaning to an artist friend, and I never have got it back, because I felt like when I read that, all of a sudden I understood better how to talk to my colorists.
Well, I can hook you up with
by the way, you're one.
I can hook you up with the replacement, but for everybody else, Hi-Fi Color for Comics is available on Amazon.
And I gotta say, it is the best book I've read on the subject in terms of me, a neo-Luddite, understand how to talk to colorists in this modern age. So I think it's really
so much.
phenomenal.
I mean, I think my wife is she's an archaeologist, but she's also has a PhD in education, and so having my creative brain and her education brain, I think we came together in a nice way, and we're able to present the information, hopefully in a way that people find fun and entertaining and insightful, and not just like a bunch of Photoshop technobabble.
That's great. I want to ask something specific about Return of the Warrior and Haikyuu, the two books that are out now. And that I wanted to know, since we have Gardenio Lima's pencils finishing Billy's pencils on this, do you find any specific challenges in working off of pencils rather than working off of traditionally inked art?
Well, I mean, it is totally different. I think any colorist would admit that coloring inked art is probably easier or faster. But what I really enjoy about this project is that I can color and paint and blend into the pencils a little bit. So where the pencils lighten and get gray, the color can kind of blend with that and create a visual that's a little bit different than other comics. And I think that, comics is a collaborative medium. And when we get the color and the pencils blending together, now we're having a collaboration in the visuals. So I don't know how Billy feels about it. To me, it's sort of like an elevation where we get this sort of like painted, almost, I don't know, like it's its own new visual language compared to some of the other comics that I've worked on.
Well, I've been a fan since She #1, and I have the Billy, since we've been friends, he's heard from me quite regularly. I like this. I don't like that. What are you doing? Are you out of your mind? This is great. Do more of this, that kind of stuff like that. But as Stephen has quoted, I felt like Haikyuu is the Godfather 2 of She Comics. Everything you guys were doing together clicked. And I think the gauntlet that you've thrown down for yourselves about the third chapter of this, am I blowing it by saying trilogy, is a really, you've set a powerful standard. So this leads me back to you, Steve. What was in how you guys worked, where you co-wrote the first issue, and then you guys basically plotted the second issue, but you did the writing?
Oh, Billy, your microphone is off.
Billy, you're muted.
If I may,
Yes.
because with my ADD kicking in, Jeff, you had asked me this earlier. Where are we now with She, Return of the Warrior, and with Haikyuu, and now the follow-up, Sakura, which will be an Indiegogo Kickstarter campaign in the fall. But basically, it's 15 years after, 20 years after the initial Way of the Warrior storyline. And now Anna Ishikawa is now a single mother raising her teenage daughter, Hotaru. She is the cultural director of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden in New York City, in Brooklyn. And her warrior days are far behind her. And then through a series of unfortunate events for her, she's brought back in. And she once again has to take up the naginata to save her daughter, Hotaru. And that's where we're at. And
Right,
it was almost like I wanted to
let me follow up on that, Billy. You made a pretty bold decision to go the opposite of most of the big comic publishers, and you had your character age
in real time.
What was behind that decision for you?
I think I wanted my comic character to grow up. And I love the idea of how, like, when I first created She back in the 90s, and Deborah and I had just graduated from college, we were young and the whole thing, and just through our life lessons and our life experiences of what we've experienced in the past 20, 25 years, I thought, how great would it be to have a comic book character age in real time and tell a story. And honey, I might make you blush, but we've been together for 30 years. And she's never looked more beautiful than she does to me today. And that's saying something, because she was smoking hot when we first met. Sorry. And but I love that.
I would like to say objectively this is true.
Yeah. And I like the idea that that Anna's now fighting for something much bigger than herself. And the story of She, again, it's a modern day samurai story where Anna was raised and drafted into this shadow war that's existed for 500 years between opposing clans or sects, really, of the Sohai warriors, which were the warrior monks of medieval Japan.
All right. So this actually changes my question to Steve, but we'll get back to the one I was going to ask before. Steve, I know you knew about She. Billy was your friend and everything like that, but how familiar with the character and all the nuances and all the history were you? Did you have to read a bunch of comics to get up to speed, or were you just ready to dive in day one?
Yeah, I was very close to the book when it first came out, but I did have to do my work in taking a look to first off revisiting. Because the book, it's no secret, and it's mentioned fairly early on, involves Arashi, who's been around since the very beginning. So I did revisit. And then Billy is, of course, an encyclopedic knowledge of She. And when he's not, he knows which book to point you towards. And then there's just a lot of research that's not She specific, that's Japan and the language specific that one can do. Geography, New York, geography, Japan. And so forth. So there was reorienting, but I want to piggyback on your question to Billy about the bold choice. And I think the bold choice speaks to who Billy is and why Billy has been so popular with his fans. And why he made that choice is because it was a great choice, because it's a choice filled with integrity, originality, freshness, not just lockstep doing what other people do. It's how he's kept this character alive and so many of the other things that he's worked on alive. It was, I think it was just a brilliant choice. It always seems to excite people, fans, people who write about it. It seems such a simple, obvious choice, but no one seems to make it. And I like that Billy did. And that was one of the things that was so exciting about that energized me, and I could tell really energized Billy to jump into this.
Debbie, you'd been a witness to so much of the history of the character. What did you think of the decision to have the character age and bring her back in that fashion?
Well, there were some discussions in prior years for some other ideas, shall we say, that I was not exactly on board with. So this one I was excited about because it was something, as Billy said, that we could both relate to. in a certain sense. And just to echo a lot of what Steve said, Billy's decisions are not necessarily what many artists would be, where they're art driven. Billy is a storyteller first and foremost in everything he does. So it gave him a real story to tell. This wasn't going to be a one shot. This was, what do we do with she now? So if he had to go back to when she was young and just invent things that happened, it wouldn't have been as legitimate, and it wouldn't really have enabled him to tell stories. They would have just been incidents that happened. But here he had a real story, which leads to many other stories, which is great, because what I'm hearing is that there is a great desire to have she continue. So he's got the end of this, as you pointed out, trilogy coming with a new storyline that kind of takes off from there. So we're going to have some very happy fans.
That's great. I'm personally very glad to hear that. And Steve, as somebody who's written a lot of different things, as you mentioned, sort of your resume is everything from, Broadway style productions to to film, and everything in between. How does writing a comic for you, now that you've become familiar with the ins and outs of the medium, what are the advantages of it to you?
Well, I'm also, a filmmaker. I went to NYU. My whole, plan, and I directed 2 features. So one of the things that you discover, and I'm not the first filmmaker to venture into graphic novels who's discovered this, is like, oh my gosh, I can basically write and direct $100 million film for not $100 million. And then your artists and your whole artist team are basically your cinematographer, your production designer, your casting director. So you get to kind of bring this without all these other committee type voices coming in, and all these, you don't have to make compromises that involve budget, because it's something that appears on a page. So that process was just wonderful. As far as, what I'm bringing to it, to me, storytelling is storytelling, from the first cave man or woman who came in and just had an altercation and thought with a woolly mammoth. And now I'm going to tell you the story about, oh my God, I'm trapped with a woolly mammoth, and there was no way out, and that was Act 1. And then all the ways they tried to escape the woolly mammoth was Act 2. And then when they finally had that do or die moment, and finally what they did to finally get home and tell you the story, there's Act 3. And everything is 3. Any story well told is told with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so I didn't see any reason. I didn't think there was some other language to, and even if you're doing something serialized, even if you watch an episode of a serialized TV show, for example, still that episode has a beginning, middle, and end that then shoots you into the next episode. So I didn't think there was any difference, nor do I right now think there's any difference in telling a good story to your audience as a graphic novel. But I was surprised in my discussions with people, with fans, and even with Billy. It's like, yeah, so many graphic novels are just essentially, and comics are just set pieces, one visual sequence after another, forgetting to actually have a story. To me, I don't know how to tackle a book without telling a story classically, and so that's what I really brought to it. It's what we did with Stoker and Wells, and what we did with each individual book. Even though this is a series, the first book leads into the second book. It does have a climax. Book 1 has a big, satisfying climax, and then they're kind of like, oh wow, now I got to read the second book because of those last moments. And then book 2,
the comic book magic of to be continued.
Yes, and then
thank you, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Yeah, and book 2 has a real satisfying climax. It is a beginning, middle, and end, but then it shoots you into the third book. So
Brian, I want to ask about the storytelling there. Brian, I specifically want to ask Brian, as somebody who's seeing the art when the story portion of this is finished, have there been moments in this story that sort of blew you away?
Well, there's definitely moments that blew me away. I think, people who maybe haven't met Billy or don't know Billy personally, is he has so many amazing storytelling ideas, and he will let you sort of experiment through those. But the cool thing is that he has this really finely tuned sense of like who she is, what the book should be, and what's right for the story. And so if you are, throwing out ideas, whether it be in color, art, whatever, and he's just like, yeah, go for it, go for it, go for it. But the minute there's something that's just like slightly off, he'll steer the ship in the right direction. And it might seem like a little bit of a bummer at the time, but I kid you not, anytime that happens, you get to that point where you've made the change and you've steered the ship and you're like, oh my gosh, he was right. Like, it's so much better because of this change. And I think that that's not always the case in this industry, whether it's a writer, creator, whoever. But with Billy, it seems to like 99.99% of the time, like whatever his final decision is, you step back and you're like, wow, that made this scene or this book so much better. And so I think that sense of storytelling also comes through in the art. And you get those scenes, whether it's a quiet moment between mother and daughter or a big explosive action moment that he says, oh, this was sunset, but let's make it nighttime. It'll be more dramatic. And you're thinking, how am I going to make the deadline? But then you push through and you get it done. And you're like, he was right. It plays so much better. So, those are the things that resonate with me, is that it's not just, she isn't just a product. It's not just, a comic book character. It's like becomes a living, breathing, thing. And when I think you are a fan and you read the stories, you then become part of the stories too.
I think that's a really great observation. There's a scene in Haikyuu. There's one that it may end up being my favorite page out of a She comic, any She comic ever to date. And to me, when I say it out loud, it's a car chase in She.
Yeah,
it sounds ridiculous. I know when Billy told me about it, I was like, what? And just like you said, the finished product, I look at that page so often, and it's just killer. Deb, I want to
real quick, Jeff, what I love about Brian though too is like Brian brings, he's being too kind. When we have our like a scene like this, if I may, this is a flashback scene that Steve had written 1 hour earlier, and it's before Hotaru was kidnapped. But and she's only she's a 15-year-old girl, but she's no Shrinking Violet. She actually she fights him. She fights with everything she has against this powerful maniac, really. But I love that Brian added this really subtle sepia tone to the panel, which is in stark contrast to say something like this when we flash back to the present with watercolory, stunning colors that he adds. And I just love the back and forth because I think it makes it real easier for the reader too. And we got some really great compliments on that they love that because it's a really fast-paced story. I mean, we only have so many pages to tell the story in, and Steve is like, well, we have to go back, in Haikyuu, we have to flash back to what happened in the Return of the Warrior, and how Brian did that was Brian added that sepia tone to it.
Well, yeah, it automatically visually sets it apart from the other stuff.
Yeah,
and it has that comic book language of, hey, this is different. So yeah, I think that really worked out.
Great job, thank you, Brian. Great job,
incredibly well. And the great thing about this is that if you read Return of the Warrior and then Haikyuu, this is all building up to something really great. And Deb, you touched on this a minute ago. You think the fans are going to be really happy as this thing continues. I want to ask about this because when you guys brought this back, another bold decision was you didn't go traditional publishing, you went crowdfunding. What has that involved for you? Because I know that's the consuming part of your job, Deb.
I wouldn't even know where to begin to answer that question. We learned everything on the fly. We were petrified and we dragged our feet for 3 years. Is this the year? Should we do this? and it's a very, very scary idea in general, that you're really leaving your fate directly, where previously in the traditional comic business, your fate was in one being, the distributor. Now we have to depend on a whole bunch of people to give and contribute and be interested enough to make this happen. So our nerves were shot, and it took us a long time to finally be able to just hold our breath and leap. And to this day, anytime we add anything, as even now we're talking about the omnibus, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, but what I like about it too, Old Bean, is that it gives you a sense of accountability. You're really held accountable by your customers, because we're dealing directly with the customers. Now we will go next year in 2022 back to comic shops. We will be in Diamond and in the catalogs and all. But it's a great way for small creators, for indie publishers to compete, I think, on the mainstream. Because now, once we do go through Diamond and we do through comic shops, we're going to offer guaranteed ship dates, because the books will all be done before they're even solicited. The books will be done, and the retailers will know that they're going to get their books on this certain date, and if not, we'll make them returnable or what, and but it gives us a chance to compete, because because they know the books are coming out, because that's something that's plagued indie publishers from the very beginning of the direct market, at least.
But it was never an issue for you.
It's because I care. Hey, I can draw. Hey, Brian and I can draw a comic book in 9 days and get it out. And I don't know how good it's going to look or read. But sometimes it takes a little longer because we care. Hey, you only have one chance, at this is our chance for immortality. And that's why maybe I take a little longer once in a while. But now we're ahead of the game. We'll have Sakura will be complete with all. This is our plan, Brian. I haven't filled you in on this, but it will be penciled, inked, colored, lettered, all ready to go before we even solicit the books. And all we'll need is the fans to help us, pay for it, to help get it done through crowdfunding.
It's not soliciting; it's launching a campaign.
Right before it launches. See, I'm still old school. Before we launch the campaign, the book will be complete. All 56 pages of the comic, maybe 64 pages.
And it's a phenomenal goal, and I look forward to that. I look forward to that being the case.
Well, what's fun about that? I do that to Steve, and Steve will send me pages. I'm like, Steve, we can always add another page, right? And Steve's like, what? I'm like, yeah, let's add another page or two. I do
want to talk about the collaborative process between you guys again for another minute. One of the things that, as both as a fan, as a contributor, and an editor, I was concerned about when you started Return of the Warrior, was that you guys be on the same page with the tone of the She that had gone before. And I'd like to really ask each of you, and Billy, we'll start with you. How did you guys get on the same page about that so quickly? Because I remember any discussions about that, I think I stopped after page 9.
Yeah, because we did have so many notes. But see, I think the biggest resistance was me and Deb, because my wife is my staunchest supporter, but she's also my biggest critic. And she has, she owns half of this herself. This is all of ours. So she's always thinking, I think with that side of her brain, will the fans respond well to this, as opposed to me? And I'm exploding with all ideas. And I really think what it is, it comes down to a comfort level, and to be working with professionals, which these two men right here, and with Mindy Lopkin, our letterer, and with Gardenio Lima, my finisher, if you will. We just assembled this fantastic team. And it all started, I think, when Steve and we had a 3-hour Zoom or a Skype. And that's when I was asking Steve. I had my notes. I sent it to him that I'm bringing She back for the first time in 15 years. I'm nervous. And just by Steve then just asking me questions and asking me follow-up questions and where did this go? And almost it was a giant revolving circle, and again keeping things structured with acts. Okay, Billy, so you're talking this is your first act. I don't think you need to. Let's save this for the second act, because this is you can move these pages farther along in the story, blah blah blah. And that's how Steve, right? I mean, Steve, we just started to, and we just started.
We went through, Billy was certainly key on all these books, and it's probably been this way from the beginning, on the spine, on breaking the back of the story, on really what is the story of this book. And Billy came into all three books he had done some pre-thinking about where he saw it going. And when he came to me with the first book, there were some mysteries involved. There was a little bit of a whodunit. We were talking about the people who were the potential villains. Who would it be? Who would it not be? And then, we would discuss, well, what are the pros and cons of this person? What is it really saying about she and her story, and where does it give us a way to position ourselves into a next book? And I'm really happy with the decisions that were made in book one. So again, same thing. Then it was let's co-write. But so I was writing the script. I'd send it to Billy. Then there were once we actually signed off on what we'll call the treatment, which is sort of the story written out in prose and saying this sequence is going to take place from page 11 to page 14. This is just this one page will be this. Then I would write script pages, send them to Billy for notes, and Billy would start doing the penciling. And then there were some pages I would want Billy to actually do the scripts, and we're credited as co-writers. And when we were finished, and I think Billy started, and Billy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Billy just got finally he saw what he needed to see to say, yeah, Steve's got this. Steve's got this, and I got a lot to do to draw. I got a lot to do with the other things I'm doing. I'll just be the guy who helps construct the story with him. I'll let Steve write the script. So the second book, before we started writing, he said, look, I just want you to know for Haikyo, let's do the story together. Let's hash out the broad strokes of the story, but why don't you just write the script? And I was happy to do it. And he still gives obviously his notes and feedback on it, a suggested line here or there, but we're sticking to that treatment that he and I created, which actually had to, and part of because of the big twist at the end of Haikyo, which I'm not going to put any spoilers here. We kind of, and Deb was right. It's like, okay, this twist can't exist for the sake of the twist. Where do you go with it? Where does it go from here? And so that was a great question that came from a concern for the property, which I totally get. But it actually forced Billy and I to think really creatively about where we go from here, which then trickled backwards into Sakura, the current book.
That was a really great conversation to be a part of, and watch you guys dealing with a very serious question that Deb posed, and making it work into a huge story element going forward. So that's pretty exciting. So Billy, we're coming up on the end of our time here. Yeah. And I want to make sure we get in whatever you've got coming up next, and then give Brian and Steve and maybe even me a chance to say what we've got coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Sure. Well, Deborah and I, we have the She, which will be live now. You can go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo. It's the 464-page She Omnibus Volume 1, which encompasses the first 16 issues of She and Tomoe, the crossover art that came in, written by Dan Mishkin and illustrated by Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti. But that's going to be our first Bible. It's the first of, I think, 5 omnibuses we have planned. And once that ends, then Steve and I, we launch She Sakura with Brian Miller, which will be the third act of the Return of the Warrior trilogy. Followed up, and that will be our fall project. Then we'll be followed in January of 2022, we believe, is Zombie Sama 2, Dorm of the Dead, Part 1. And with, of course, the Return of the Warrior omnibus. We're going to put those two together. And then, Jeff, you and I have She.
Don't forget John Brolia.
Didn't I say John Brolia? With John Brolia?
Nope.
Oh, sorry, Zombie Sama 2 by John Brolia and I. I apologize, John, for that. And that book is already done. John's already penciled and inked 100 pages. and we have 41 pages of Zombie Sama 2 of the 52-page story already colored. So again, that's going to follow in our pattern of having complete books before we even launch. And then Stephen and I go forwards when Anna Ishikawa, and I'll give this spoiler away, which comes in the spring.
No.
We got super big, crazy things happening in the spring of 2022. So,
all right, Brian, what do you have coming up?
Well, the team at Hi-Fi and we've got a lot of stuff coming out from DC, so I'll just tell everybody to keep a lookout for the RWBY Justice League books, Action Annual, Flash Annual, Aquaman Annual. Also, really had the pleasure to take over the coloring on Usagi Yojimbo, created by Stan Sakai at IDW. That book really means a lot to me, so if you're a fan of that, you'll be seeing we're coloring that. And of course, last but not least, we've got more She with Billy Tucci and co. So looking forward to that.
Excellent. Very glad to hear that. How about you, Mr. Peros? You've got some big news.
Yes, but first I just want to say what a true honor it is to be welcomed into the She family and to be a part of She history. I'm thrilled to be here. For those of you who have heard mention of the book that I wrote and created, that JC did such an amazing job editing and mentoring, right here on the wall here, Stoker and Wells, the first book, Order of the Golden Dawn. Now that's Billy's variant cover. We have, I think, something like 11 left, and that's it. They're on Indiegogo. I have the book on Indiegogo. Where every copy is signed. It's less than it is on Amazon, less the download. If you buy the download, it's less than it is on Comixology. And we have very special treats that you can't get anywhere. We have Stoker and Wells mugs, Stoker and Wells bookmarks. So take a look if you can. We're the only Stoker and Wells on Indiegogo, so take a look there and check it out. I am working on at Stoker Wells. Actually, I'm working with the producer to bring it to a producer who's doing some major work. Amasia, they're doing a Dark Shadows reboot for Warner Brothers TV. They're doing the Green Hornet feature with a script by David Koepp, and they are doing Stoker and Wells. So we are taking Stoker. We're packaging Stoker and Wells now with a creative team. Before going out and pitching it as this book as a first season for a series. So that's something I'm very busy with, putting the actual network pitch together for the show. My movie, The Cat's Meow, was a stage play first. It's published by Samuel French, and now I'm developing, it was just announced in the Broadway world. I'm developing a musical with a Majestic Rep, a very award-winning theater in Las Vegas, a legit theater in Las Vegas. No showgirls or chorus girls in it. So yeah, developing a stage musical of
just flappers.
Yes, flappers. Well, there are flappers, that's for sure. So yeah, just keeping the fires burning in television, theater, graphic novels, and features. That's all.
That's all.
I know, that's
all right. All right, we're coming down the stretch here. All right, we're coming down the stretch here, so I'll make this brief if I can. The day that traditionally San Diego would have started in person, July 21st, we'll see the debut of the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide number 51 and the big Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide number 51, which is our first book of our 6th decade of the guide. Yeah, and it's just amazing, and Bob Overstreet still does all the prices. So I can tell you from many conversations with him, when he did the first book in 1970, he wasn't even sure there would be a second one. He did not imagine that he was going to have a 50-year plus career of doing comic pricing. We've also got a new book coming out in the fall called the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide to Lost Universes. I'm really excited about that. I've already done a lot of the writing for the articles of that, and our frequent collaborator, Scott Braden, has joined us on that one. He's a former Gemstone staffer and great comics historian. Aside from that, I have several comics coming up, and the day we're recording this, I would say tomorrow, my first novel comes out in comic shops, and then 13 days later in bookstores. It's called Second Wednesday. It is a murder mystery set in my adopted hometown of Hearst, Texas, and I've decided to become my adopted hometown's Jessica Fletcher. People die when I show up. So I think this has been a great panel. We've covered a lot of stuff, and I think that anybody who's seen the material is excited to see more of it. And I just want to thank everybody for being a part of this.
Yes, this was great. Thank you, everyone. Everybody, enjoy Comic-Con 2021 at home, and we will see you all in San Diego for sure in 2022. So thank you all, and I don't know. Enjoy. Tally ho. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.